The rain tonight falls softly, almost like a steady heartbeat against the window. If you're settling in for the night, getting comfortable beneath your blanket, or simply letting the sound of the rain guide you into a calmer place, I want to welcome you. Wherever you are, in your bedroom, your living room, on a late-night drive, or maybe halfway across the world, thank you for choosing to spend this quiet moment with me. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching and listening from tonight? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. It's always comforting to see people from all over the world gathered here, sharing these calm, thoughtful moments together. And if you enjoy soft-spoken true crime stories paired with rain sounds, stories told gently, respectfully, and at a slow pace to help you relax, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me bring more peaceful, carefully narrated true crime documentaries like this one. And if you find comfort in the quiet atmosphere we create here, a quick like on this video goes a long way in helping others discover it too. Now, settle in. Take a slow breath. Let your shoulders relax, and let the rain become part of the background as we step gently into tonight's story. Tonight, we're traveling to the peaceful college town of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. A place filled with leafy streets, brick pathways, and the warm glow of student life. During the day, Chapel Hill is busy, students rushing to classes, laughing with friends, weaving through the campus walkways. But at night, when the world quiets down, the town takes on a softer atmosphere. Streetlights shimmer on damp pavement. Apartments glow with the last lights of students finishing assignments. Car tires whisper through the rain. And somewhere in the stillness of those early morning hours, the life of a bright young woman came to a heartbreaking end. This is the story of Faith Danielle Hedgepeth. A daughter, a sister, a friend. A young woman with a brilliant smile and a determined spirit. Someone whose warmth spread effortlessly to anyone who crossed her path. Faith grew up in Hollister, North Carolina, deeply connected to her Native American heritage as part of the Holly-Wasaponi tribe. She excelled academically, carried big dreams, and moved through life with kindness and purpose. In 2012, she was thriving as a student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, working hard, balancing her studies, friendships, and family, and planning for a future she was determined to build. On the night before everything changed, the world around her seemed ordinary. Familiar. Safe. But sometimes, the most devastating events happen not in storms or chaos, but in moments that feel completely normal. On September 7, 2012, inside the small student apartment she shared with a friend, Faith's life was taken. The news would ripple through the campus instantly, shocking the entire community. Questions formed immediately, questions that would take nearly a decade to answer. Who did this? Why? And how could something so horrific happen in a place that felt so safe? Tonight, we'll walk through the events of that night carefully, slowly, at a gentle pace designed to help you relax, even as we explore the mystery. We'll trace Faith's final hours, the clues left behind, the long silence in the investigation, and eventually the stunning breakthrough that came almost 10 years later. But throughout this journey, we'll move respectfully, preserving the soft atmosphere that helps you drift deeper into rest. If your eyes grow heavy, if your breathing slows, or if you drift in and out, that's perfectly okay. This story will be here waiting, unfolding quietly like pages turning in the rain. Because Faith's story isn't just a crime. It's a story of ambition, culture, community, love, and heartbreaking loss. A story that touched her family, her friends, her tribe, her university, and people far beyond North Carolina. So take one more deep breath. Let the steady rain guide the rhythm of your thoughts. And allow me to take you back to that quiet September night, when a bright life crossed paths with a darkness no one saw coming. This is the beginning of the murder of Faith Hedgepeth. A story of mystery, resilience, and a long road toward justice. As we move slowly into Faith's world, imagine the rain continuing to fall softly outside your window. Let its rhythm settle your thoughts as we take our time exploring who she was, beyond the headlines, beyond the tragedy, beyond the mystery that would later surround her name. Before Faith became a symbol of unanswered questions, she was simply a young woman living a full, ambitious, and beautifully ordinary life. And to understand the weight of what happened to her, we have to step back into that life, step into her warmth, her dreams, and the days leading up to that early September morning. Faith Danielle Hedgepeth was born on September 26, 1992, in a small North Carolina town called Hollister. She grew up deeply rooted in the Holly-Wasaponi tribe, a Native American community known for its resilience, its traditions, and its strong emphasis on family. From a young age, people around her noticed her sincerity, how she listened when people spoke, how she offered help without being asked, how she had the kind of smile that seemed to brighten everyone else's day just a little bit. Her teachers described her as motivated, focused, and incredibly gifted. Her family described her as tender-hearted, with a soft nature that made her genuinely loved. And her friends, they remembered her as someone who made them feel safe, supported, and seen. In so many ways, she was the kind of student who carried far more responsibility than anyone her age should have to carry, but she carried it willingly, even joyfully. Faith's dream was to become a pediatrician, a dream she took seriously. She studied hard, earned a prestigious scholarship, and began her journey at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, one of the most respected universities in the state. Getting into UNC was not easy, but Faith approached education with determination. She saw it not just as a personal achievement, but as something she could bring back to her community, her tribe, her family. By 2012, she was in her third year at UNC, balancing a demanding workload with social activities, part-time work, and the normal ups and downs of college life. She lived in an off-campus apartment with her close friend and roommate, a place filled with photos, decorations, school supplies, and the familiar clutter of student living. It wasn't a large apartment, but it was home. It was comfortable, familiar, safe. The days leading up to September 7th were ordinary. Faith attended classes, met with friends, visited the library, worked on assignments, and made plans for the weekend ahead. Nothing seemed unusual. She laughed, she talked, she studied, she rested, just like any other week on campus. If you listen closely between the raindrops, you can almost imagine that week as it truly was, simple, peaceful, routine. A week no one could have predicted would become the final chapter of her life. On the evening of September 6th, Faith and her roommate decided to step out for a while. They visited a local sports bar, a common hangout for UNC students. The atmosphere was loud but friendly, a mix of laughter, sports commentary, and the shared buzz of students unwinding after long days. Faith wasn't known for partying heavily, but she did enjoy spending time with friends. That night was no different. She chatted, relaxed, and simply enjoyed the normalcy of being a college student. Shortly after midnight, they decided to head home. The rain was light, the campus quiet. The night felt peaceful. They returned to their apartment, and for a short while everything remained calm. But at some point, Faith's roommate left again, just for a bit. It wasn't unusual, students often pop in and out late at night. Faith stayed behind in the apartment, likely settling in, maybe preparing for bed, maybe scrolling through her phone or organizing her things for the next day. The early hours passed quietly. And this is the part of the story that often makes people pause, the simplicity, the stillness, the way nothing seemed amiss. The way the world outside kept turning, unaware that something unimaginable was unfolding in a small apartment meant to be a place of safety. By morning, the sun rose like any other day. Students prepared for class. Coffee shops opened. The sidewalks filled with movement and chatter. But inside that quiet apartment, the world had completely changed. When the roommate returned and discovered that something wasn't right, she called a male friend for help. He entered Faith's bedroom, and moments later, emergency services were contacted. Faith was gone. For the campus, it felt as though someone had turned off the light. One moment, everyday life was carrying forward effortlessly, and the next, heartbreak spread through UNC like a shockwave. Faith's family received the devastating news. her tribe mourned. And investigators stepped into an apartment that held more questions than answers. Tonight, as we continue slowly through this story, we'll look at what investigators found in those early hours, the clues, the objects, the puzzling details that formed the foundation of a case that would remain unsolved for nearly a decade. But for now, breathe deeply. Let the rain soften the edges of your thoughts. And hold on to the memory of who Faith truly was, a young woman filled with light, driven by purpose, and surrounded by love. Morning arrived quietly in Chapel Hill on September 7, 2012. The sun rose gently over the university, casting a warm light across the campus buildings, the tree-lined paths, and the nearby apartments where thousands of students were just beginning their day. It was one of those calm mornings where everything feels still, as though the world is waking up slowly after a peaceful night. But inside the small off-campus apartment that Faith shared with her roommate, the calm that filled the outside world did not reach the inside. When Faith's roommate returned home late that morning, she expected to walk into the familiar routine, Faith studying, music playing softly in the background, or the soft sound of her moving around the apartment. Instead, she felt something unusual the moment she stepped inside. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. A kind of stillness that didn't feel quite right. She called out for Faith. No answer. She walked slowly down the hallway toward Faith's bedroom. The door was closed. She knocked. Again, nothing. That sense of unease grew heavier, settling deep inside her. She wasn't sure what she would find, but she knew something was wrong. Instead of forcing herself to open the door alone, she reached out to a nearby male friend, someone she trusted, someone who could come over quickly. When he arrived, she explained that she couldn't get Faith to respond. Together, they walked through the quiet apartment to Faith's bedroom door. He opened it. Within minutes, emergency services were called. The 911 call was tense, filled with confusion and fear, but you won't hear any of that in this story. Here, we're slowing everything down. We're keeping the atmosphere gentle and respectful, letting the rain soften the details that in reality were deeply shocking. Paramedics arrived first, followed soon by police officers from the Chapel Hill Police Department. The moment they entered the apartment, they knew this was no medical emergency. This was a crime scene. And one that would soon become one of the most puzzling cases in the town's history. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, a living area, and a kitchen. It wasn't in disarray in the way people might imagine in a chaotic crime scene. Instead, it felt strange. Subtle things were out of place. Things that made officers pause. One of those things was a handwritten note. The note became one of the earliest and most mysterious elements of the case. Written hastily on a fast food bag, the message was short, unsettling, and confusing. Its wording left investigators wondering if it held a clue, or if it was meant to mislead. Even today, people still debate its meaning. As investigators walked carefully through the apartment, documenting everything, they noticed other unexplained elements. Items left in odd positions. Objects shifted slightly from where they normally were. A space that felt lived in, but also disturbed, subtly and quietly. Yet nothing in the scene pointed clearly toward who had been there. What investigators did find, however, would become the most important piece of evidence in the entire case: DNA. From the earliest hours of the investigation, it was clear that a male suspect had been inside the apartment. The DNA recovered was strong, enough to definitively identify someone, if they could find a match. But as the hours passed, and the first round of suspects were interviewed and cleared, the DNA didn't match anyone they had spoken to. Detectives began the long, methodical process of interviewing people who knew Faith. Close friends, classmates, neighbors, former romantic connections, anyone who may have crossed paths with her in the days leading up to that night. It wasn't a rushed process. It unfolded slowly, with careful attention to every detail. Police canvassed the apartment complex, knocking on doors, speaking with neighbors, gathering any information they could. But the responses painted a picture of a quiet night, students sleeping, studying, or out late as usual. No one reported hearing a scream. No one reported seeing a stranger. No one had noticed anything out of the ordinary. Outside, the news spread quickly across campus. Students gathered in small groups, whispering in shock. Professors paused their lectures to acknowledge the tragedy. The university released a statement acknowledging the loss. And as the hours passed, the reality began to sink in. A bright, loving, passionate young woman had been taken, and no one knew who had done it. While the campus mourned, Faith's family received the news no family should ever hear. Her mother and father, her siblings, her tribe, they felt the earth shift beneath them. The heartbreak was immediate and immeasurable. But there was also resilience in their grief. A quiet, steady determination that they would one day know the truth. Back inside the apartment, forensic teams worked diligently. Every surface was examined. Every object photographed. Every potential clue collected. But as thorough as the investigation was, there was no clear suspect. No immediate lead. No simple explanation. What they did have was DNA. Strong, complete, undeniable. But unless that DNA appeared in a national database, or unless the person responsible resurfaced, it would remain a frustrating clue without a name. The early days of the investigation were a mix of intense effort and quiet uncertainty. Police followed every credible lead. They revisited timelines, re-interviewed witnesses, and studied the crime scene over and over. But still, no match. No suspect. No breakthrough. For now, what remained were questions, a growing list of them, and a community united in grief and confusion. In the next section, we'll continue softly through the investigation as it stretches into months, then years. We'll explore the strange clues that kept the case alive, and the DNA profile that became the cornerstone of a mystery that refused to fade. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation into Faith's death remained intense but quietly stalled. From the outside, people often imagine detectives moving with urgency and dramatic breakthroughs happening one after another. But in this case, like so many others, the search for answers unfolded slowly, quietly, and with long periods of stillness. The apartment complex where Faith lived had been thoroughly searched, and everyone who might have known anything had been interviewed, sometimes multiple times. Yet no major breakthrough emerged. And as fall settled into winter, Chapel Hill returned to its usual rhythm. Classes continued. Students moved between dorms and libraries. Life on campus pushed forward. But for the officers working the case, and for Faith's family, time didn't move the same way. Every passing day felt heavy. Every unanswered question made the silence more painful. Still, investigators never stopped working. One of the most significant pieces of evidence, the DNA found at the scene, became the anchor of the entire investigation. It told them that the person responsible had been in the apartment. It told them they were likely dealing with someone male. It told them that somewhere out there was a genetic match who, if found, could solve the case instantly. But databases can only identify someone who has already been entered into the system. And the DNA didn't match anyone in local or national files. Not in 2012. Not in 2013. Not in the years that followed. This led investigators to believe that the suspect had no prior criminal record, at least none that required a DNA submission. It also suggested the person might not have been stopped or arrested since that night. In other words, they had seemingly vanished into the ordinary world, living quietly, unnoticed. Throughout the years, police continued interviewing people. Some individuals were questioned multiple times as new details emerged or theories shifted. Friends of Faith, acquaintances from campus, former romantic connections, anyone who had crossed paths with her became part of the investigative puzzle. But one by one, those people were cleared. The mystery only deepened. In the years that followed, the case drew national attention. True crime communities discussed theories. Students at UNC held vigils. Faith's family continued honoring her memory, speaking about who she was, the life she lived, the future she deserved. Still, there were no answers. Then, a few years into the investigation, detectives took a step that would reshape the case. They turned to Parabon Nanolabs, a company known for creating DNA-based portraits. Genetic snapshots that can predict characteristics like skin tone, facial structure, ancestry, and even the likelihood of freckles or certain hair textures. Using the DNA collected from the apartment, Parabon generated a detailed suspect profile. For the first time, investigators had something more tangible than a string of genetic code. They had a face, not a perfect face, not a guaranteed match, but a scientifically informed estimate of what the suspect might look like. The profile suggested that the individual might be male, of Latino ancestry, between late teens and early 20s at the time, with dark hair and medium skin tone. It wasn't enough to identify a specific person, but it helped investigators narrow down the search. And for a moment, the profile breathed new life into the investigation. News outlets shared the composite image, hoping someone might recognize the face. Tips came in, as they always do, but none led to a definitive match. And then, the quiet returned. Year after year, the case lingered in this strange space, active, but unmoving. Investigators continued their work, revisiting evidence, reanalyzing DNA, reviewing old interviews, consulting outside experts, and waiting for new technology or information that could break the silence. Meanwhile, Faith's family carried their grief with extraordinary strength. They attended memorials on campus. They spoke at events honoring her life. They kept her memory alive not through anger or vengeance, but through love, through holding on to who she was, not just what had happened. Her tribe, the Hollywossaponi, also honored her. Faith's name became a symbol within her community, a reminder of both the beauty of her life and the injustice of her loss. But even with the love and support surrounding her memory, the unanswered questions weighed heavily on those closest to her. Why did this happen? Who was responsible? And why had the case remained unsolved for so long? By the 7th year, the 8th year, and then the 9th, many wondered if the case might ever be solved. Some feared the truth would remain hidden forever. Others held on to hope, believing that DNA, no matter how long it takes, never forgets. And in the quietest moments, when the rain fell softly, when the nights in Chapel Hill grew still, when Faith's family looked at her photographs and remembered her laughter, all they could do was wait. Wait for the day when the DNA would match someone. Wait for the moment when silence would break. Wait for justice to finally begin. It would take nearly a decade. But in the end, that match did come. In the next section, we'll move gently through the turning point, the moment when a routine DNA submission in 2021 finally identified a suspect, bringing new hope to a case that had felt frozen in time. Morning sunlight crept slowly across the quiet apartment complex, warming the tops of the pine trees and carrying the gentle hum of a new day. Students were beginning to stir. Doors opening, coffee makers starting, footsteps moving toward early classes. But inside the small apartment that Faith Hedgepeth shared with her friend Karina, time was not moving forward in the same way. It was as if the air inside her bedroom had been suspended overnight, still and heavy, holding the weight of something unspeakable. At 11 a.m., Karina returned to the apartment after spending the night elsewhere. She expected to find Faith asleep, maybe recovering from the long night before. The door was unlocked, a detail she didn't think twice about at first. Students left their doors unlocked more often than they should. It was a college environment, and the illusion of safety was always stronger than the reality. But the moment she stepped inside, something felt off. The air felt wrong. Too still. Too quiet. She called out for Faith once. Twice. No answer. As she walked toward the bedroom, the soft tapping of rain against the window seemed to grow louder, almost echoing through the apartment, amplifying the silence inside. She pushed the door open gently. The room was dim, curtains still drawn, and for a moment she thought Faith was simply sleeping. But then her eyes adjusted, and she froze. Faith was lying on the floor beside her bed, partially covered by a quilt, her body unnaturally still. There was blood, more than anyone should ever see. And the silence of the room swallowed everything. Karina stepped backward, hand over her mouth, and fled the apartment in panic. What happened next unfolded with a kind of frantic confusion that often follows tragedies no one expects. Karina called a friend before calling 911, a detail that would later become a source of speculation. But in that moment, to her, it was instinct. She couldn't process what she had seen. She needed help, someone to steady her, someone to confirm what she feared. When the 911 call finally came through, the dispatcher struggled to make sense of Karina's trembling voice. Between the sobs and broken words, the operator learned only fragments: a girl, blood, not breathing, please send someone quickly. The storm outside, which had intensified, seemed to press against the windows of the entire complex, as though nature itself responded to the horror within. Paramedics arrived quickly. Police followed. And what they found inside that small student apartment would spark one of the most haunting investigations in modern North Carolina history. Faith had been brutally beaten. The scene was violent, chaotic, and deeply personal. Her injuries told a story of rage, frenzied, forceful, unrestrained. A nearby bottle, broken and stained, appeared to be part of the assault. The quilt covering part of her body seemed to be placed there intentionally, a chilling act that investigators often interpret as guilt, shame, or familiarity between the killer and the victim. There was no sign of forced entry. Nothing seemed stolen. And yet, the apartment did not feel untouched. Drawers were open. Items were scattered. And on a fast food bag, investigators found something deeply disturbing: a handwritten note. The letters were shaky, uneven, but clear enough to read. It said, "I'm not stupid. Jealous." A message that would haunt the case for years. A message filled with rage, but also emotion. Jealousy pointed to something personal, something close, something intimate. As investigators secured the scene, neighbors gathered behind the yellow tape, whispering, confused, horrified. No one could imagine that someone could walk into a college apartment in the early hours of the morning and commit such a brutal act. Rumors began almost immediately. Had it been a stranger? A crime of passion? A robbery gone wrong? Or something far darker, an attack born from someone Faith knew, someone she trusted? As the rain continued to fall softly, pattering against roofs and sidewalks, it felt almost symbolic, like the world was trying to wash away something too painful to confront. Inside the apartment, detectives moved carefully, documenting everything. Faith's cell phone was missing. So was her laptop. Investigators wondered if the killer had taken them to hide messages, calls, or evidence of communication. But despite the horror of what they found, one piece of evidence stood out above all others: DNA. A mixture of male and female DNA was found at the scene, most notably on a beverage container and on Faith's body. Investigators collected it, stored it, and sent it to the lab. And when the results returned, they revealed something chilling. The male DNA did not match anyone in Faith's immediate circle. Not her ex-boyfriend. Not Karina's acquaintances. Not the men they had recently interacted with at the clubs or the party. The killer, it seemed, was someone else. Someone close, but not yet identified. Someone who had walked into that apartment quietly, acted with ferocity, and left behind a trail of unanswered questions. As police worked the scene, Karina and other friends were taken in for questioning. Their shock was palpable, their alibis detailed, their emotions raw. But with no matches in the system and no clear direction, investigators quickly realized this would not be a simple case. It would become a puzzle, one with missing pieces, blurred edges, and shadows that stretched far beyond that small bedroom. And as the hours turned into days, one thing became clear. Finding Faith's killer would require unraveling every thread of her life, every friendship, every argument, every whisper of jealousy, and every moment from that final night. In the days, weeks, and months after Faith Hedgepeth's murder, the Chapel Hill Police Department worked tirelessly, meticulously following every lead, reviewing every detail, and trying to piece together the events of that tragic night. But as often happens in cases that involve someone the victim knew, the path to answers was neither straightforward nor quick. Each new tip brought questions, and every new interview seemed to lead to more uncertainty. The investigation became a careful dance of patience and perseverance, with officers and forensic teams moving slowly, documenting, analyzing, and reanalyzing the evidence. The apartment remained a central point of interest. Everything had been collected and catalogued, including the fragments of DNA that would later become crucial. Officers walked through the complex repeatedly, speaking with neighbors, friends, and anyone who might have noticed unusual activity. Students remembered the nights around September 6, describing ordinary moments, laughter, quiet study sessions, errands, late-night walks. Nothing seemed out of place. But the absence of unusual activity was, in itself, perplexing. As months turned into years, the case drew wider attention. Local news reported on the ongoing investigation, and national media occasionally highlighted the tragedy. Faith's family remained deeply involved, keeping her memory alive through vigils, scholarships, and public appearances. They never wavered in their desire for answers, but each passing year without resolution made the weight of waiting heavier. The DNA collected from the scene remained the most promising piece of evidence. It clearly indicated that the perpetrator was male, but traditional DNA databases yielded no matches. At first, this felt like a dead end. The DNA was complete, unambiguous, but unless the person had a prior record or their genetic profile was in a system, it would not connect to anyone. Investigators began to look for alternative ways to use the DNA. In 2017, a new tool became available, forensic genealogy, a technique that had solved high-profile cold cases in other states. Investigators submitted the DNA to Parabon Nanolabs, a company specializing in creating detailed facial composites based on genetic information. This was the first time Faith's family and the public saw a visual approximation of the suspect, an artistic reconstruction informed by her DNA, showing likely facial features, hair color, and ancestry. The profile suggested the individual was male, likely of Latino descent, with dark hair and medium skin tone. He was likely young at the time of the crime. While not definitive, it gave investigators a new lead and a renewed sense of hope. For years, the case remained frozen in uncertainty, punctuated only by incremental developments. Investigators followed up on every tip that came in from the public, revisiting old leads and double-checking details. Students and neighbors were questioned again, sometimes multiple times, as forensic methods improved and new technologies became available. Each small step was painstaking, deliberate, and slow, like walking along a path shrouded in mist, searching for shapes that were only faintly visible. Meanwhile, Faith's family continued to honor her life. They spoke of her laughter, her determination, her warmth, and her intelligence. They remembered her as a young woman full of life and dreams, someone whose presence in the world had been a gift. Her memory became a quiet, persistent thread running through Chapel Hill, uniting friends, students, and community members. And then, nearly 9 years after that fateful night, a breakthrough arrived. A routine DNA submission from an unrelated case matched the genetic profile collected from Faith's apartment. The name associated with that DNA, Miguel Enrique Salguero Olivares. The match was definitive. The man who had evaded identification for nearly a decade had finally been placed in the spotlight. Investigators moved carefully, quietly, ensuring that the arrest would be conducted with precision and that evidence was meticulously documented. When the arrest was announced, Faith's family, the university community, and the public were struck by a mix of emotions: relief, grief, and finally, a sense of closure, at least in part. The individual responsible for taking Faith's life had been identified, ending years of uncertainty and speculation. But even as the legal process began, the story of Faith Hedgepeth remained about more than a crime. It was about resilience, about a family and a community that refused to let her story fade. It was about the power of careful, patient investigation and the remarkable ways technology can help uncover truth, even after years of silence. As the rain continues to fall softly outside, imagine the quiet persistence of the investigators, the steady hope of Faith's family, and the calm determination of a community refusing to forget. This story, like the raindrops outside, has continued to fall steadily over time, sometimes softly, sometimes heavily, but never ceasing entirely. Faith Hedgepeth's life, her dreams, and the questions surrounding her death carried on, even as answers slowly emerged. And now, nearly a decade after that night, the first real steps toward justice were finally being taken. In the next section, we'll gently explore the arrest, the impact on the community, and the quiet ways Faith's memory has been honored, while maintaining the soft, sleep-friendly narration with rain sounds. Nearly 9 years after that quiet September night, the name Miguel Enrique Salguero Olivares appeared in the files of investigators working Faith Hedgepeth's case. The breakthrough came from a routine DNA match that connected him to the crime scene. After almost a decade of unanswered questions, the mystery that had haunted Faith's family and the Chapel Hill community began to resolve. The arrest was conducted quietly, methodically, and professionally. Law enforcement officers approached the situation with care, ensuring that due process was followed. While the nation watched the news unfold, the local community experienced a complicated mix of emotions. Relief, sorrow, and an undeniable sense of closure finally beginning to emerge. Faith's family, who had carried nearly 9 years of grief and uncertainty, reacted with a mixture of tears and quiet reflection. Her parents, siblings, and extended family had endured countless anniversaries of Faith's death, each one a reminder of her absence and the unanswered questions that lingered. Yet when the arrest was announced, they allowed themselves, finally, a measure of hope. Hope that justice would, at long last, take its first deliberate steps forward. Community members also responded. Students at the University of North Carolina paused, remembering Faith not as a victim but as a bright young woman who had touched many lives. Vigils were held in her memory, candles were lit, and soft murmurs of remembrance filled quiet rooms. The campus, still familiar with her absence, felt, for a brief moment, a gentle release from the long-standing tension that had shadowed her story. Yet even with the arrest, the story remained heavy with reflection. Families, students, and neighbors were reminded of the fragility of life and the ways in which tragedy can appear even in the most peaceful settings. Chapel Hill, a town often associated with academic achievement and calm streets, had been forever altered by that night. The community learned that darkness can enter quietly, unannounced, and leave a lasting impression that ripples through time. For Faith's family, attention turned slowly from grief toward advocacy. They remembered her life not only in sorrow but in the way she lived, her ambition, her dedication, and her warmth. Scholarships were established in her name, providing educational opportunities for students who, like Faith, sought to make the world a better place. Tributes were made by her tribal community, the Holly-Wasaponi, keeping her memory alive within the culture that shaped her. Each act of remembrance became a soft, enduring beacon of light in a world that had seemed darker since her loss. The media coverage surrounding the arrest was careful, but unavoidable. Headlines carried the name of the suspect, while quieter articles focused on Faith's life, her contributions to the community, and the enduring pain of her loved ones. True crime enthusiasts studied the case, forensic experts reflected on the innovative DNA methods that finally identified the suspect, and students returning to campus read about Faith's story with renewed empathy and awareness. Through it all, the rain outside Chapel Hill continued its steady rhythm, gentle, persistent, and calming. Imagine it now, falling softly on the roofs, the streets, and the trees, as though offering a quiet reflection on the passage of time. The rain mirrors the slow unfolding of the investigation, long, steady, and ultimately revealing. Each drop is a reminder that persistence, patience, and care can reveal truths even after years of uncertainty. Faith Hedgepeth's life, though tragically cut short, left a profound mark. Her dedication to her studies, her kindness toward friends and family, and her connection to her tribe are remembered with reverence. Her story has inspired conversations about justice, persistence in cold cases, and the importance of never forgetting those we lose too soon. In the years following the arrest, Families in the region and across the country have seen hope that similar methods might one day solve their own cold cases, providing closure long after tragedy strikes. And yet, the story remains gentle when told this way, not for shock, not for fear, but for reflection. Listeners, like you, are invited to honor Faith's memory in quiet contemplation. Her life was meaningful, her presence impactful, and even in absence, her influence continues to ripple through the lives she touched. Families who have endured loss often speak of the small, enduring gestures that preserve memory: a photo, a smile, a story shared, a candle lit. These gestures are quiet, but they are powerful. They are reminders that light exists even after darkness enters a space. Faith's legacy continues in the ongoing work of investigators who never gave up, in the students who remember her kindness, and in the wider community that honors her as more than a victim. Her story reminds us that the process of justice is slow, sometimes frustratingly so, but that persistence, courage, and meticulous care can uncover truth, even when it seems buried beneath years of silence. As we slowly reach the end of this part of her story, imagine the rain falling softly outside your window. Imagine Chapel Hill, a town that still remembers Faith, bathed in gentle light, its streets calm after the storm. Imagine her family sitting quietly in reflection, students speaking her name softly, and investigators feeling a sense of progress after nearly a decade of waiting. Her life, her laughter, her dreams, they remain. And even as the story moves toward closure, the gentle rhythm of remembrance, reflection, and justice continues. Each raindrop is a reminder: the world keeps turning, memories persist, and hope, even after years of silence, can find its way home. As the rain continues to fall softly outside, it carries with it a quiet sense of reflection, a gentle reminder that even in the wake of tragedy, life leaves traces of meaning, memory, and resilience. Faith Hedgepeth's story is one of loss, yes, but it is also a story of enduring light, of a young woman whose presence touched so many lives in ways that cannot be erased. Faith was more than the events that ended her life. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a student who dreamed big and worked tirelessly toward her goals. She was a member of the Holly-Wasaponi tribe, proud of her heritage, deeply connected to her community, and determined to give back. Every smile she shared, every small act of kindness, every moment of dedication left subtle imprints on the people around her. And those imprints, like the soft rhythm of rain, continue to resonate quietly, persistently, across the years. Her family, though forever changed by her absence, has carried her memory with grace and love. They have created lasting tributes, scholarships in her name, memorials, and traditions that honor who she was and who she hoped to become. Her friends and the Chapel Hill community continue to remember her with fondness and reverence, recounting stories of her humor, warmth, and brilliance. Even strangers who have followed her story are touched by the quiet strength of her legacy, understanding that a life, even a life cut short, can still inspire and influence others. The case itself reminds us of human persistence. Investigators, who never gave up despite years of uncertainty, demonstrate the slow but steadfast pursuit of truth. The tools of modern science, combined with patient dedication, eventually led to a breakthrough, a testament to the way that careful attention and unwavering resolve can illuminate answers, even after nearly a decade. And yet, even with justice beginning to take shape, the most important part of Faith's story lies not in the crime itself, but in the life she lived. We can close our eyes and picture her walking through campus, smiling at friends, studying late at night, dreaming of helping children as a pediatrician. We can remember the energy she carried, the love she shared, and the promise she embodied. These memories are hers alone, but they also belong to anyone willing to carry her story gently forward. As the rain continues to fall, let it serve as a soft reminder: the world, though it may contain darkness, also holds moments of quiet beauty and enduring light. Faith Hedgepeth's life, though tragically brief, remains a source of reflection, a testament to love, courage, and the small yet profound ways one life can leave a mark on many. In the quiet of this night, in the rhythm of the falling rain, we honor her memory. We acknowledge the fragility of life and the resilience of the human spirit. And we carry forward, softly, the story of a young woman whose light continues to shine, even through the shadows. Story 2. The rain falls softly tonight, tapping gently against your window, creating a rhythm that is almost like a heartbeat. Perhaps you are lying in bed, or curled up with a blanket, letting the sound of the rain guide your thoughts and calm your mind. Wherever you are, I want to welcome you. Before we begin, I wonder, where are you watching and listening from tonight? Share it in the comments below. It's always comforting to know we are not alone, even when we are listening quietly to a story of tragedy and reflection. If you appreciate true crime stories told slowly, paired with rain sounds, designed to help you relax while remaining compelling, you may want to subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to continue creating calm, respectful narratives that honor lives lost while keeping the pace gentle enough to listen to at night. Tonight, we travel to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, a town known for its leafy streets, brick-lined pathways, and the quiet hum of university life. By day, it is bustling with students rushing to classes, meeting friends at coffee shops, and studying on campus lawns. By night, however, it becomes quieter, a soft glow from streetlights reflecting on damp pavements, and a stillness that carries a sense of calm. Yet in the early hours of September 7, 2012, a peaceful night turned tragic in a way no one could have imagined. This is the story of Faith Danielle Hedgepeth. Faith was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a student with bright ambitions. She grew up in Hollister, North Carolina, deeply connected to her Native American heritage as a member of the Holly-Wasaponi tribe. Her family remembers her as kind, intelligent, and full of life. Teachers called her motivated and disciplined. Friends remembered her as someone who made them feel seen, heard, and cared for. And her smile, warm and genuine, could light up a room, leaving an impression that lingered long after she left it. By 2012, Faith was a thriving college student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, working diligently toward her dream of becoming a pediatrician. Her life was full but balanced, filled with classes, studying, work, and time with friends. She was like any other young woman her age. Focused, joyful, and full of potential. On the night before her death, the world around Faith seemed normal. She spent time with her roommate, laughing, talking, and carrying out the usual routines of college life. Later, she returned to her apartment, likely preparing for the next day, unaware that her life was about to be tragically cut short. In the quiet of the apartment that night, the ordinary became the unthinkable. A life full of promise, warmth, and ambition was suddenly and violently interrupted. The world would awaken to shocking news that would ripple through her university, her community, and beyond. This story is not told to frighten you, nor to dwell on the darkest details. Instead, it is told slowly, respectfully, and carefully, so that you may follow Faith's life, the investigation, and the eventual path toward justice, all while allowing yourself to relax, reflect, and listen. Faith's story is about more than tragedy. It is about resilience, memory, and the enduring impact of a life that touched many. It is about a family who refused to forget, a community that held its breath for nearly a decade, and investigators who worked patiently, quietly, and meticulously to bring answers. So, take a deep breath. Let the rhythm of the rain outside guide your thoughts. Allow yourself to enter this story gently, remembering that at its heart, it is a story of a young woman who lived fully, loved deeply, and continues to inspire those who remember her. This is the story of Faith Hedgepeth. A story of life, loss, and the long journey toward truth and justice. As the rain continues to fall softly outside, let us take a moment to step into Faith Hedgepeth's world before that fateful night. Imagine her mornings in Hollister, North Carolina, waking to the quiet of a small town where everyone knew each other's names. The sun would rise over tree-lined streets, casting golden light on homes and gardens, and Faith would begin her day surrounded by the love of her family, the warmth of her community, and the gentle rhythm of daily life. Faith was born on September 26, 1992. From a young age, she was described as bright, compassionate, and deeply connected to her heritage. She was a proud member of the Haliwasaponi tribe, a Native American community that instilled in her a strong sense of family, resilience, and responsibility. Her upbringing taught her to value her roots, respect those around her, and work hard for what she wanted in life. These lessons would shape the young woman she became. Even as a child, Faith displayed remarkable curiosity and intelligence. Teachers remembered her as attentive and disciplined, a student who took her education seriously. She enjoyed learning, but she also cared deeply for those around her. Friends and family recall how she would help others without hesitation, always ready to lend an ear or a helping hand. Her kindness was quiet but unmistakable, a trait that would leave a lasting impression on everyone who knew her. By the time she reached high school, Faith had already developed a clear vision for her future. She dreamed of becoming a pediatrician, a goal she pursued with determination and focus. Her studies were rigorous, but she balanced them with community involvement, extracurricular activities, and the occasional moments of fun that remind us she was still a young woman with a love for life. She was serious about her ambitions, but never at the expense of the warmth and humor that made her so approachable. In 2010, Faith began her studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Transitioning from a small town to a bustling college campus could be intimidating for anyone, but Faith adapted with grace. She excelled academically, embraced new friendships, and participated in campus life, all while keeping her roots and values close to her heart. Her dedication to her studies was evident in her coursework, but it was her interactions with others that truly set her apart. Friends remember her as someone who could listen without judgment, offer advice when needed, and always make them feel valued. Faith shared an apartment with a close friend, creating a small, comforting home on campus. Their space was filled with the ordinary clutter of student life, books, study materials, photographs, and mementos from home. It was familiar, safe, and a place where Faith could rest after long days of classes and responsibilities. Within those walls, she laughed, studied, and dreamed, living the life of a young woman with a future full of promise. Despite her focus and ambition, Faith also enjoyed the social aspects of college life. She occasionally went out with friends, attended small gatherings, and embraced the moments of spontaneity that make these years so memorable. Yet she was never reckless. She balanced her responsibilities with the simple joys of being a student, always mindful of her goals and the path she had set for herself. Faith's life, at its core, was one of balance. She combined intellect with empathy, ambition with kindness, and independence with loyalty to her family and community. She was a young woman with plans, dreams, and the quiet strength to pursue them. Her presence in the lives of those around her was comforting, her laughter infectious, and her determination inspiring. And yet, on the night of September 6, 2012, all of that potential, the warmth, the intelligence, the laughter, the life that had been built, was suddenly, tragically interrupted. The peaceful rhythm of Faith's days, like the gentle patter of rain outside your window, was shattered in an instant, leaving her family, friends, and community struggling to understand what had happened. But before we move to the night of her murder, it is important to remember Faith not as a victim, but as a young woman who lived fully and loved deeply. She was a student who pursued her dreams with quiet determination, a friend who offered comfort and kindness, and a daughter whose family cherished every moment with her. Her story is not only about tragedy, but also about the life she lived, a life that touched so many, and whose memory continues to resonate years later. As we let the rain fall softly and the night deepen, imagine Faith walking through her days at Chapel Hill. Studying in the library, chatting with friends, laughing over late-night coffee, and dreaming of a future where she could help others. These images, gentle and alive, remind us of the light that existed before darkness intervened, and the enduring presence of her spirit in the hearts of those who remember her. The night of September 6, 2012, began like any other for Faith Hedgepeth. Chapel Hill was quiet, the kind of still evening where the only sounds were distant traffic, rustling leaves, and the occasional laughter of students walking home from late-night study sessions or small gatherings. Rain had begun to fall softly, draping the streets and sidewalks in a gentle sheen, turning the world into something reflective and calm. Faith returned to her off-campus apartment that evening, likely carrying the small routines of any college student. Texting friends, preparing for the next day, tidying her space, or simply unwinding from classes and work. Her roommate, Karina, had been elsewhere that night, leaving Faith in her familiar surroundings. The apartment was cozy and lived in, textbooks stacked neatly, photographs on the walls, and personal belongings arranged with quiet care. It was a space of comfort and routine, a private world where she felt safe and in control. As the night deepened, the ordinary sounds of a student's evening filled the apartment. Outside, the rain continued its soft rhythm. Inside, Faith might have been listening to music, reviewing notes, or enjoying a quiet moment before sleep. To an outsider, nothing suggested that this night would take a sudden, tragic turn. The next morning, the world outside the apartment continued as usual. Students walked to class, early risers brewed coffee, and the town carried on in its predictable rhythm. But inside the apartment, something had changed. The ordinary had shifted into the unimaginable. Karina returned later that morning, expecting to find her friend, her roommate, safe and well. When she stepped inside, however, the apartment felt different. There was a stillness, a quiet tension that made her pause. She called out for Faith. No answer. She moved through the rooms, each step slower than the last, as a creeping sense of unease settled in. When she approached Faith's bedroom, the silence became almost palpable. She knocked, called her name again, but still there was no response. The air felt heavier, the soft rhythm of rain outside now seeming to echo the tension inside. She stepped back, unsure of what to do, then reached out to a trusted friend for support. Together, they approached the bedroom door. When the door was opened, the unthinkable became clear. Faith was lying in her room, still and unresponsive. The initial shock was immediate. The soft panic, the trembling, the disbelief, all unfolded in the quiet apartment as the rain continued to fall outside, masking the sounds of what had just occurred inside. Emergency services were called. Paramedics and police arrived swiftly, their movements methodical, professional, and precise. For the first time, investigators saw the scene that would soon become central to one of Chapel Hill's most haunting cases. Though the details are difficult to imagine, what matters is how the investigators approached their work, carefully, deliberately, with respect for Faith and for the gravity of the moment. Subtle clues were already present. A handwritten note, scrawled hastily on a piece of fast food packaging, became one of the earliest points of investigation. It suggested anger and jealousy, but it left questions unanswered. Investigators noted the positions of items in the room, the quiet disorder, and the absence of forced entry. Nothing appeared to have been stolen, yet the scene suggested a personal and intentional act. The DNA collected from the scene became the cornerstone of the investigation. It would, years later, provide the key to identifying the person responsible, though at that moment it offered only a hint, a whisper of a trail to follow. Detectives and forensic teams worked slowly, photographing, documenting, and analyzing each detail, every movement measured, every item examined, all while maintaining a calm, respectful approach. Outside the apartment, neighbors and students began to notice the unusual activity. Questions arose, whispers spread, and the initial shock rippled quietly through the community. Chapel Hill, a town usually filled with routine and predictability, now faced a profound disturbance. Yet, in the midst of the rain, life outside continued its soft rhythm, masking the sorrow and fear unfolding inside the apartment. Faith Hedgepeth's life had been vibrant, full, and promising. And in this quiet, reflective moment, it became painfully clear how abruptly that life had been interrupted. The apartment, the rain, the soft sounds of the morning. These ordinary elements would become forever tied to the memory of a young woman whose story had only just begun to unfold in the hearts and minds of her family, friends, and community. This moment, the discovery, the stillness, and the beginning of the investigation, marks the start of a story that spans nearly a decade, one of patience, persistence, and the search for truth. In the following sections, we will explore how investigators slowly pieced together clues, the challenges they faced, and the enduring hope that justice could one day be achieved. The morning after Faith Hedgepeth was discovered, Chapel Hill Police Department officers arrived at her apartment with quiet urgency. Their goal was clear: to understand what had happened, to piece together a timeline, and to gather every possible clue that might lead them to the person responsible. For investigators, there was no rush to sensationalize the moment. Instead, they moved methodically, carefully documenting every detail, photographing the scene, and collecting evidence for analysis. The apartment, though small, held many subtle signs that investigators would later study meticulously. Items were out of place, a few drawers left open, and the handwritten note found near Faith's body drew immediate attention. Written on a fast food bag, the note's words were shaky, hastily penned, and disturbing in their simplicity. Jealousy and anger were apparent, but the note offered no name, no clear explanation, just emotion frozen on paper. Even as investigators worked, the soft rain outside continued to fall, tapping against the windows in a slow, rhythmic cadence. It was almost as if the weather itself mirrored the somber pace of the investigation, quiet yet persistent, urging patience. Every raindrop was a reminder that time moves slowly, and that careful observation is often required to uncover the truth. One of the most significant pieces of evidence collected that morning was DNA. Forensic teams swabbed surfaces, collected samples from objects at the scene, and analyzed them with painstaking attention to detail. The DNA told them several things. The individual involved was male, and the genetic material was not immediately matched to anyone in local or national criminal databases. At the time, this was both frustrating and enlightening. The DNA confirmed that someone had been present and provided a tangible lead, yet it offered no immediate answers. Investigators began canvassing the area. Friends, classmates, and acquaintances were interviewed. Detectives asked about the night before, about any arguments, about relationships, and about anyone who might have had a motive to harm Faith. Students spoke of routine activities, campus life, and friendships. There were no immediate suspects, no clear leads. Every answer seemed to generate new questions. The apartment complex and surrounding neighborhood were revisited multiple times. Officers spoke with neighbors who might have noticed unusual activity or strangers in the area. Campus police coordinated with local law enforcement to ensure no stone was left unturned. The process was slow, deliberate, and methodical. Each detail mattered, each clue could be a key piece of a much larger puzzle. During this early phase, Faith's family was deeply involved. They answered questions, provided context about her life and relationships, and worked closely with investigators. Their hope was steadfast: that the person responsible would be identified and that justice could be achieved. At the same time, their grief was profound, quiet, and present in every interaction. They were living in a world reshaped by loss, and yet their perseverance never wavered. As days turned into weeks, investigators began to rely heavily on forensic evidence. The DNA collected became the centerpiece of the case. At first, matches came back negative. The male DNA did not belong to anyone with a prior record or any known connection to Faith. It was a dead end, but a dead end that still held promise. Investigators preserved every sample, understanding that future technology might provide answers that were currently out of reach. The community of Chapel Hill reacted with quiet concern. Students lit candles, held vigils, and shared memories of Faith. Her story spread beyond her immediate circle, touching faculty, classmates, and neighbors. People reflected on her kindness, her warmth, and the life that had been taken far too soon. The combination of grief, community support, and methodical investigation created a sense of hope, a belief that answers might eventually emerge, even if slowly. The early investigation laid the foundation for everything that followed. Careful documentation, meticulous evidence collection, and the preservation of DNA meant that the case was never abandoned. Even as years passed with few leads, the groundwork of these first days ensured that the eventual breakthrough would be possible. Faith Hedgepeth's story, though tragic, is also a story of persistence. It is a story of investigators who worked patiently, a family that never gave up, and a community that continued to remember her. The rain outside continues to fall gently, a reminder that truth often emerges slowly, in its own time, and that careful, quiet work can eventually uncover what seemed lost. In the next section, we will explore the years of the cold case, the challenges investigators faced, and the use of DNA profiling to finally identify the suspect, all while maintaining the soft, sleep-friendly narration. Time, as it often does, moved slowly in Chapel Hill after those first frantic days of investigation. Weeks became months, months became years, and the case of Faith Hedgepeth's murder gradually shifted from immediate shock to a long, patient pursuit of answers. Investigators never stopped working, but progress was painstakingly slow. Each lead was followed, each tip investigated, yet nothing seemed to point definitively to a suspect. The DNA collected from Faith's apartment remained the centerpiece of the investigation. It was a thread of truth, quietly waiting for technology to catch up. At the time, traditional databases yielded no match. The male DNA found at the scene did not belong to anyone in local or national criminal systems. To investigators, this was both frustrating and promising. Frustrating, because it meant years of uncertainty and unanswered questions. Promising, because it suggested the perpetrator was someone who had not yet been caught, someone who remained unknown, invisible in official records. Detectives revisited old leads multiple times. Friends, classmates, and acquaintances were interviewed again and again, sometimes as new information emerged, sometimes as technologies improved. The community cooperated, offering memories, details, and theories. Each conversation, however small, was carefully documented and cross-referenced. Every statement was a potential clue, every recollection a piece of a larger puzzle that investigators were determined to solve. In the meantime, Faith's family continued to honor her memory in quiet, meaningful ways. Vigils were held on campus, scholarships were established in her name, and her story remained alive in the hearts of those who knew her. Her Holly-Wasaponi community paid tribute, remembering not just the tragedy of her death, but the vibrancy of her life. The rhythm of everyday life continued, yet her absence was palpable, a shadow gently threading through the years. Then, nearly 5 years after her murder, a new technology began to offer hope: forensic genealogy. This method, combining traditional DNA analysis with family tree research and advanced genetic profiling, had already solved other cold cases across the country. Investigators submitted Faith's DNA to Parabon Nanolabs, a company that specialized in creating DNA-based composite profiles. These profiles could suggest the ancestry, facial structure, hair color, and other physical characteristics of an unknown individual. The results of this work were remarkable. For the first time, investigators had more than just a string of genetic code, they had a visual approximation of the person they were searching for. The profile suggested the suspect was male, likely of Latino descent, with dark hair and medium skin tone, and likely in his late teens or early 20s at the time of the crime. While not a perfect likeness, it provided direction, narrowing the scope of the investigation and allowing detectives to focus on new leads. Even with this breakthrough, progress was slow. Tips continued to come in from the public, some based on the composite image, others from memories or coincidences. Every lead was followed with patience, every detail carefully weighed. Investigators understood that solving a case like this required precision. One misstep could allow the perpetrator to remain free, and could compromise the delicate balance of evidence painstakingly collected over the years. Meanwhile, Faith's family remained a source of quiet strength and resilience. They spoke publicly about her life, her achievements, and her dreams, ensuring that she was remembered not just for her tragic death, but for the warmth and intelligence she brought to the world. Their advocacy helped maintain public awareness and support for the ongoing investigation. Nearly 9 years after Faith's murder, the persistence of investigators, combined with advances in forensic technology, finally bore fruit. A routine DNA submission in 2021 led to a match, identifying the individual connected to the crime, Miguel Enrique Salguero Olivares. The breakthrough was the result of years of meticulous work, patience, and the careful preservation of evidence. For Faith's family, the revelation brought a complex mix of emotions: relief, sorrow, and finally a measure of closure. For investigators, it was a quiet triumph of perseverance. For the community, it was a reminder that even after years of uncertainty, justice can be pursued, and truth can emerge. The rain continues to fall softly outside, a gentle rhythm accompanying the years of waiting, investigation, and hope. Like the slow, persistent drops, the search for justice never ceased. Faith Hedgepeth's life, and the careful work to honor her memory, remained at the center of it all, a quiet, steady reminder that even after the longest night, answers can eventually come. Nearly 9 years after that quiet September night, the investigation into Faith Hedgepeth's murder reached a critical moment. Through years of meticulous work, careful evidence preservation, and advances in DNA technology, investigators finally identified a suspect, Miguel Enrique Salguero Olivares. The news of the arrest reverberated quietly through Chapel Hill, offering both a sense of relief and the weight of reflection to a community that had waited almost a decade for answers. The arrest itself was carried out with calm precision. Law enforcement officers approached the situation methodically, ensuring that all procedures were followed carefully, preserving the integrity of the investigation. There was no spectacle, no rush, only a quiet, steady commitment to justice. For Faith's family, the announcement brought a complex mix of emotions. Relief mingled with grief. Sorrow intertwined with a faint but enduring hope that the person responsible would finally be held accountable. In the days following the arrest, the Chapel Hill community reflected on the years that had passed since that tragic morning in 2012. Students and faculty at the University of North Carolina, friends and neighbors, and even people who had followed the story from afar, paused to honor Faith's memory. Candlelit vigils were held quietly on campus, soft conversations recalled her warmth, her laughter, and the impact she had on everyone she met. Her absence, long felt, was acknowledged again, but this time with the possibility of justice moving forward. Faith's family continued to keep her memory alive in meaningful ways. Scholarships in her name provided opportunities for students to pursue education and personal growth, extending her legacy beyond the immediate circle of her friends and loved ones. Her Haliwasaponi community honored her contributions and connection to her heritage, reminding others of the strength and pride that defined her life. Even in absence, Faith's influence persisted, like the gentle rhythm of rain falling outside, soft, continuous, and quietly present. The arrest and subsequent media coverage brought a renewed sense of awareness about Faith's life. While headlines inevitably focused on the crime, thoughtful reporting highlighted her accomplishments, her aspirations, and the positive impact she had made on her community. Friends shared memories of late-night study sessions, laughter shared over coffee, and moments of kindness that defined her character. Through these remembrances, Faith's story transcended the tragedy itself, becoming a testament to a life lived with purpose, compassion, and intelligence. Investigators also reflected on the significance of persistence. Years of careful, patient work, combined with advances in forensic genealogy, had made the identification possible. This quiet success demonstrated that even when cases grow cold, truth can be uncovered with dedication, precision, and perseverance. For families facing similar uncertainty, Faith's story became a symbol of hope, proof that answers, though delayed, can arrive through persistent effort and the thoughtful application of technology. The community's response also revealed the ways in which collective memory can honor a lost life. Chapel Hill, a town known for its quiet streets and academic focus, came together in small but meaningful ways. Students and neighbors spoke softly of Faith's kindness, her determination, and the brightness she brought into their lives. They remembered her not only for the tragedy that ended her life, but for the light she radiated while she was here. Even years later, the rain falling softly over Chapel Hill serves as a gentle reminder of her presence, of the life she led, and the lives she touched. Each drop mirrors the steady work of investigators, the quiet resilience of her family, and the enduring impact Faith had on everyone around her. It is in these small, reflective moments that her memory feels most alive. Faith Hedgepeth's legacy is one of warmth, intelligence, and quiet strength. Though her life was tragically cut short, her story continues to inspire. It reminds us of the value of patience, the importance of justice, and the enduring power of memory. In every scholarship awarded, every vigil held, and every story shared, Faith's spirit persists. As the night deepens and the rain continues its gentle rhythm outside, we can reflect quietly on her life, her influence, and the care with which her story has been preserved. It is a reminder that even in the face of darkness, light can endure, and even in the wake of tragedy, love, memory, and justice persist. As the rain continues to fall softly outside, let us take a quiet moment to reflect on Faith Hedgepeth's life and the legacy she left behind. Her story, though marked by tragedy, is not defined solely by the events of that September night. It is a story of warmth, kindness, intelligence, and the enduring impact of a young woman who touched the lives of many. Faith was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a student with dreams and aspirations. She carried herself with quiet determination, a gentle confidence, and a commitment to her goals that inspired those around her. Her connections to her Haliwasaponi heritage, her family, and her community grounded her, while her curiosity and ambition propelled her toward a future she had worked so hard to create. Even in the years following her death, Faith's presence has been felt in the soft, meaningful ways that memories endure. Friends recall her laughter and the comfort of her company. Family members honor her life through scholarships and tributes, keeping her story alive in acts of remembrance. Chapel Hill remembers her not only as a tragic figure but as a vibrant young woman whose life mattered, whose spirit continues to inspire. The persistence of investigators, the careful preservation of evidence, and the eventual identification of the suspects serve as reminders that truth and justice, though sometimes delayed, can prevail. The slow, steady rhythm of the investigation mirrors the gentle fall of rain outside, a reminder that even when progress is not immediately visible, patience, dedication, and hope can guide the way forward. Faith's story teaches us about the fragility of life, the strength of memory, and the quiet power of resilience. It reminds us to honor those we love, to value the moments we have, and to carry forward the light of those who are no longer with us. In the midst of darkness, there is always a thread of light, a thread that persists in acts of remembrance, in quiet reflection, and in the ongoing pursuit of justice. As you listen to the rain tapping softly against your window, imagine Chapel Hill holding her memory gently, her family honoring her quietly, and a community keeping her spirit alive. Let the sound of the rain guide your thoughts, slow your mind, and remind you that even in sadness, there is beauty, and even in loss, there is love. Faith Hedgepeth's life, though tragically brief, leaves a lasting imprint. Her story continues not only in the pursuit of justice but in the hearts of those who remember her, who share her story, and who carry forward the quiet light she brought into the world. And now, as the rain continues its soft, rhythmic fall, we can hold her memory gently, reflecting on a life that mattered deeply, and on the enduring presence of her spirit in the world. If you've been listening quietly tonight, following the story of Faith Hedgepeth, we hope you found a moment of reflection, calm, and understanding in her life and legacy. Stories like hers remind us of the fragility of life, the strength of memory, and the importance of honoring those who are no longer with us. If you'd like to continue exploring true crime stories told gently, paired with the soothing sounds of rain or ambient night, consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribing ensures you won't miss future narratives that are carefully researched, respectfully told, and designed to help you relax and reflect while learning about these real-life stories. You can also like this video if you appreciate the effort to present these stories with care and sensitivity. Liking helps others find content that is both informative and calming, creating a space where true crime can be explored thoughtfully, without sensationalism. Finally, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let us know where you're listening from tonight, or share your thoughts on Faith's story and legacy. Your presence here, quietly listening, is what makes this community meaningful. Thank you for joining us, and for honoring Faith's memory with us tonight.